And we're live. Hi,
Hello.
everyone, and welcome, Jane, to our wonderful LinkedIn Live today. I'm really, really thrilled that you are free to be my guest.
I'm delighted to be here. This is the first LinkedIn Live that I've done, so
Oh,
I'm
it's
really
exciting.
excited. Yeah. Mm.
Amazing. So, Jane, I don't even really know where to start with introducing you. You are someone who impresses me so much. You have created Careering into Motherhood, which is an awesome and like growing organization of women who are in their childbearing years and are sort of looking at what that means for then their career and their pattern of work. It's an organization that I've been aware of for some time, and I've been one of your partner coaches for about the last year, haven't I?
Yes.
Because I love the organization. I think that what it stands for and the work that you guys are doing is so important.
Mm.
Um, what would you like to add to that? Do tell us like a little bit of your background, so people can get a feel for who you are and what you do.
Yeah, certainly, and thank you, Jessica. So I set up originally a Facebook community because I was running my own recruitment business, helping women to find mid-level and senior roles that offered some form of flexibility, and that was just brought about my own experience, having negotiated a job share after I returned from maternity leave at director level with HSBC. So I knew that these large multinationals were really well placed to be able to offer flexibility because I had a global team. We were working across all different time zones and people in the Middle East who were even working different working weeks. So I knew that employers were very well placed to be able to offer flexible working. But it just wasn't coming through in the candidates that were being presented. So as I say, I set up I set up a recruitment business first of all to try and help change the dial, shift the dial on that. But I was inundated with candidates and was turning away the very women that I had wanted to help. So I set up a Facebook community initially to be able to say, look, I'm probably not going to be able to help you, but head over to the Facebook group where gradually more and more women were joining and people were sharing lots of different ideas and lots of different ways of navigating parenthood with a career. And it's just kind of grown and grown. And actually, I was just looking at it. February next year the community will be 5 years old. We're now 10,000 women in Facebook. We've got an online community overall of 20,000, and we've recently, at the start of this year, added a coaching community to help support those women. And I guess to your point around the future of work and the way that we at Careering into Motherhood see it, it is very, very much around coaching being a key enabler to help women go and build and create the careers that they want on their terms. There's lots of work going on. I've been involved myself in campaigning, with government. I've been at the Department for Business, talking about what can change, what employers can do, what government can do. And I just grew so tired of waiting to be let in, to be able to sit at that table, that I want to flip that all around, because I see that when a woman is really, really well coached, when she has self-belief, when she has lots of self-confidence, she can go and build a career that works for her on her terms. And then everybody wins, right?
Yeah, and I love that. And I think it's really interesting what you've pulled out there, because I think I've encountered a similar thing in
Mm.
my journey, but also kind of in my business, because basically one of the main reasons I am self-employed is because, and I've been self-employed for nearly 9 years now. The
Mm.
reason is that I actually couldn't find an employer who would accommodate what I wanted when I had my first son. And I found it to be massively easier to just take myself out of the system and to do my own thing. And now I have a multi six-figure business, and it's just like it's been such a no-brainer for me. But I think there are lots of people who rightly feel like they don't want to be self-employed. Like, what I did is kind
Mm.
of like the equivalent of jumping off a cliff
Yes.
and figuring out my parachute on the way down. And I've been extremely fortunate, and I also have a skill set that was very transferable to being a coach, which was not really by design. So it has been very, like, the parachute has been opening for some time for me, but like, not everyone is going to want to do that. It's an incredibly risky thing to do. So I love, Jane, that you are sort of starting to have these conversations at organizational level and at government level. But I think where the change often starts is actually women in our own lives as individuals saying, what do I actually want? What do I want to be negotiating for? And I think that coaching is a really valid route to discovering some of those things. And what I'm always struck by, actually, in the Careering into Motherhood Facebook group, is just the number of people who are asking really similar stuff. Because I think there's a few scenarios, aren't there? But often it's like, I'm coming back from maternity leave and I don't really like the offer that they're giving me. What can I do? Or it's like, oh, I'm already doing flexible work, but the way that this is going, I feel like I'm being expected to do a full-time role on part-time hours, and I'm only getting paid part-time hours. But just the numbers of women who are like, yes, this happened to me. Yes, this happened to me. Yes, this happened to me. I think by connecting all these women to each other, it's so powerful, because when I was going through that, I felt like I was the only person in the world who couldn't get an employer to agree to what I was asking, which was like three days a week, with some flexibility where I needed it. Like that wasn't a conversation that really any of my employers had been willing to have. So to be able to just, I don't know, to empower women and just be like, let's just shine a light on this whole area, because you are not the only person who is finding this brick wall that you're hitting up against. And I do really think that it's so valuable for women, but also for the country, the world, for women's careers not to get sidelined and for women not to be put on the scrap heap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a big mismatch between what employers think their employees want in this space, and what women actually want. And so we are actually starting to move into that area where we're using all the insight, all the intelligence that we're getting. We're currently running a survey, which we've had already over 2,000 responses to then be able to take that next year to some employers and say, look, these are the real issues that women are facing. And let's face it, recruitment is really expensive. So you don't want to lose all of that knowledge. You don't want to lose that talent. And often when somebody's asking for flexibility, it's for a really short period of time during their career overall. So it might feel to an employer like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We can't navigate or manage this. I think one of the positives to have come out of the pandemic is it has de-risked in a lot of cases the approval for flexible working. So now let's capitalize on that and let's stop people leaving their employers if they don't really want to. Let's really work on that and help employers understand more what they can do to attract and retain their talent.
Yeah, you mentioned there, Jane, something that I'd love to ask you a bit more about, which is that mismatch between what employers tend to think that people want and what women actually do want and need. Can you say that? Are you happy to share some of the detail on those kinds of differences?
Yes, certainly. So I think what we're seeing, and again, this research hasn't closed yet, so I don't want to preempt too much, but it's got another week to run. So again, if we can share perhaps the link in case anyone is watching this and thinks they'd like to spend 10 minutes completing the survey, that would be amazing.
We can absolutely do that.
But what we're seeing from coming out of the research is we are asking, what would an employer have to offer you to get you to either rethink the fact you'd like to leave or to attract you if you're looking for a new role? And what we're seeing is that the old kind of employee benefits of things like healthcare and pension and holiday, those are just a given now, right? People can actually go and, with flexible benefits and things like that, they can get those from almost anywhere. So as an employer, you need to be offering those if you just want to attract good, decent talent. But what really helps retain women in particular, and there's some recent survey data I was looking at, not from us, that was something really astounding. Like 60% of women are thinking of leaving their roles next year. Now, that level of flight risk is a fright risk as well, because it's hugely expensive to replace those women. So what we asked them is, what kind of things would get you to stay and or to join a new organization? And it is things that help with modern life. So it's things like childcare support or wraparound care, or even help with things like domestic chores, financial support. Imagine if an employer could say, well, we've got a partnership with Molly Maid or some cleaning company. So, women are still taking on the majority of the domestic load. That is just a fact in sort of heterosexual partnerships. And what we're seeing is, if employers can do more to regenerate their employee benefits, they will not only attract better talent all round, because let's face it, everyone in modern families does their fair share of the workload, but it's also making it easier for women to return to work and to stay there. And then, of course, they go on and continue to, increase their salaries and increase the value and what have you that they're delivering to the economy. So when I say everybody wins, literally everybody does.
Yeah, and I love that, because it's kind of, when you're a parent of like a nursery age or even a school age child, but like I think it's when you're dropping off like an under 4 to a nursery on your way to work, and then you spend the day away from the nursery setting, and often it's a drive away. And then like if anything happens, which at that age over winter can be like, I remember with my eldest, he had back-to-back ear infections for about 6 months, his first winter at nursery. And if I hadn't have been self-employed, I think I would have used all of my annual leave, as a lot of my friends were having to do, like taking annual leave to cover the sick pay. So just kind of getting something really simple, like getting a workplace nursery scheme where like you are just upstairs or you're just in another part of the building, as opposed to like a mile away or more if you're commuting into London. That is actually quite revolutionary, isn't it, in terms of like easing the pattern. But I think part of this whole thing for women is quality of life, because the reason that I said no to returning to work after maternity leave is that what I was being offered, it would have meant I didn't see my baby between Sunday night and Wednesday night. I would have had to leave the house at 7, get back at 7. Like those were kind of his waking hours. I've missed the entire thing. And I looked at it all and I was like, after like I've paid for all this really expensive childcare that I don't really want, I would probably have about £2,000 a year. And it's like, do I want to do all of this? No, I don't really, to be honest. And I think for me, that was what pushed me into being like, I think I'm going to go self-employed, because if I can make more than £2,000 a year, I'm winning. But like, what would you say in terms of, I guess, like thinking about the future of women in work, like is there pliability with some of these employers? Are they willing to take on this kind of stuff, or is it just that experience of they're starting to be maybe open to the conversations sometimes, but like money isn't on the table to actually implement some of these things?
I don't know, just because I think at the moment, as I say, because there is there's been around for a while, this concept of the war for talent. So attracting, retaining, recruiting really good people is hard for employers, and they are trying all different means and ways of doing that. Now, when you think that a significant proportion of your workforce is female, and then a proportion is also going to have children, and both male and female, then they are struggling to know what to do as an employer. So some of these things, and this is some of the ways that we can help employers, and this is obviously where our cohort of coaches comes in, because we have a hugely diverse cohort of coaches who can work with employees across, again, from all different diverse communities. But just feeling that support, feeling as though your employer gets it, feeling as though your employer cares and wants you to be the best that you can be at work. And there's obviously recently there's all the brilliant work that people like Jolie really are doing at Pregnant Then Screwed, in really highlighting the cost of childcare. And of course, you know, it's huge, it's extortionate, but I would really like to see that dialogue changed, where women are talking about, oh, but the cost, you know, it's not worth me going back to work because of what it's going to cost. If you look at it, from if you are in a dual income family, you're looking at that percentage of across your whole income. And then also, while I think it is outrageous that the government doesn't support families until the child is 3, and then there are various childcare options, but for that first 3 years, while things are the way they are, you've got to consider, if I take 3 years out of the workforce, it is that much harder for me to get back in. And the research, all the data shows that women never return at the same level, and they never catch up on the salary earnings that they were projected to be.
And the other dimension to that is that they often also forego their pension during those years. So they have the double issue of not having a private pension that is topped up enough, but also not having enough state pension years to qualify.
Yes.
Which it's kind of like, it's the ticking time bomb of the future, isn't it? That if women are crowded out of the workplace during their childbearing years, it creates this like gulf between where they would have been and where they now actually are, which is completely unacceptable. And I think as well, like those first 3 years, they are expensive, aren't they? It's a real sting to have to fund your baby and then your toddler through those first 3 years. And I think as well, it's such a difficult time physically. And I guess I'd love to know your opinion on this, Jane, because I feel like one of the things that women are constantly having to fight against is this perception that, like, if you're pregnant, if you have a baby at home, if you have kids at home, you don't show up in the same way at work. You're kind of not as committed, and you're very distracted. I don't know. What is your opinion about that? I would love to know.
I think you'll know my opinion on it. I mean, I can talk for the passion and commitment that our community members have for their careers. I mean, it just blows all of those arguments out of the water. And I can say from personal experience, when I went back into this job share role, very similar to you, I was leaving the house at 6 a.m. to get in for 7 to be able to get everything done. I had to leave out that door at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in order to do nursery pickup. I had a really long commute back in those days.
And you get fined, don't you, if you're late? It's a stressful thing because you're like, got to get there.
Exactly. And also, I mean, the thing is, so much of what we do at work is not a matter of life and death, unless obviously you're in a particular setting. But it is a matter of a small life actually depending upon you to be there at a certain time. If you're not there by the time that nursery closes, no one else is this child cannot defend it or support itself. So, you have to be there, and it is stressful. But what I can tell you, and this is consistent across the board, that when we are given flexibility to work in that kind of way, we are so productive during those hours. We are not the ones going off to the gym at lunchtime. We are not the ones having the long water cooler chats and going for coffees and lunches and things. We are working, we are doing what we need to do in order to get back out there. But the other thing that has come out of the research, which is really quite interesting, the flip side of it is often when we become mothers in the workplace, we are kind of there's almost like this Madonna effect that assumes we therefore can't go to the Christmas lunch or the Christmas drinks or team drinks after work every so often. And we've got some great anecdotes about women when they've been told, oh no, sorry, we didn't invite you because we assumed you wouldn't want to come. And it's actually like, no, I'm still a human being, I'm still a person, I still want to connect with my team, I still want to be part of this organization, so don't write us off.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful. And it's a really tricky thing, isn't it? Because I think sometimes it's very stressful when you're trying to juggle everything in the background. And then you get like all these, like, I don't know, schools, they love to send you a million emails about a billion things, don't they? And it's like, don't forget that costume, don't forget to bake a cake, don't forget. And then sort of also dealing with that kind of level of complexity from the employer side as well. I think for me, a big part of this whole conversation comes down to quality of life. And I think that there are just points where it's like, it's too much. Like no human being can take that on, or really wants to take on that level of like complex admin on both sides of things. What role do you think there is for women as individuals to start to change some of those boundaries, I guess?
I think this is where it comes back to coaching. And if you don't have this innate sense of being able to just get things in place and in balance by yourself, and let's face it, a lot of us don't. So it's having that coaching that really gives you the confidence and the self-belief to be able to go and create, as you've done, Jessica, go and create a work life that works for you. Things were working for me. I knew the moment I'd gone back to work that, I mean, literally within the first week, it was like this. I needed to be back at work. I wanted to be a working mum. But thereafter, it was a question of, well, jumping on a train to go over to the other side of London every day of the week and adding 3 or 4 hours to my day just in commutes and things like that was not working for me. So it was about, how can I create a work-life balance that does, and I say balance, I'm not sure that that's ever that easy, but create a work life that works for me. And it's so powerful. I think we need to stop looking back at, there's this kind of ivory tower of where we see successful people and how they've got there. Actually, if we look to the future, we can create, I mean, our time really is now. There are so many initiatives. Everything is right for us to be able to go and do this. Slight issue of the cost of living crisis and potentially a recession on the way, which is not going to be without its challenges. But in terms of women supporting other women, in terms of the opportunities that are available to us now, or the opportunities we can go and create, they have never been, it has never been as good as it is now. It can be an awful lot better, do not get me wrong, and it needs to be an awful lot better. But what we see when women go and create businesses, or when women rise to the top, is that naturally those organizations are more inclusive, more diverse, and more equitable anyway. So as I keep coming back to this point, that it really does benefit everyone. So I just think it's about us going and asking for what we want, and when we're not getting it, finding other opportunities that do work for us, and supporting each other to go and build and create these workplaces of the future.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something that I say quite often, actually, in the work and the content that I create, that I've noticed that too. Women who set up their own businesses tend to employ mainly women. I employ all women on my team. I think I have one guy who's sort of peripheral, but like that is almost kind of, that is almost the blueprint for what happens when women can't find what they're looking for in traditional workplaces. They then, as you have, as I have, we then start to create something from scratch that is built around the shape that we need it to be. And I think then, because this is the thing as well, isn't it, that not everyone is called to go and found their own business, or be a coach like I am, or be a world changer like you are, Jane. But like the fact that we are doing those things, it does create opportunities for other women who also need that flexibility for a variety of reasons. But it starts this kind of new world order of actually a job. My team members, they're all remote. I've never met any of them actually in person. We're together on Zoom all the time, but it's not something where it's important to me that they do certain hours. They actually both have other clients themselves. Like they work for 5 or 10 people like me. But like the amazing thing is that it feels to me like they only work for me. They're able to be so responsive, because it's not like, oh, do 10 till 12 for me and then 12 till 2 for someone else. And I think that question of balance, quite often it's about everyone finding their own sweet spot with it. But in order to do that, we need to put quite severe boundaries in place and be saying no to a lot of things, so that we can create the volume of activity that is manageable. Because I think I don't know if you agree with this, Jane, but I think that often the balance gets out because actually we're trying to do sort of 3 people's life in one, and it's overwhelming and it's exhausting and it doesn't lead to good things for us or our kids.
Yes, yeah, it's a big weak spot of mine that I am not very good at creating boundaries, I guess, when it comes to work. I think because I've gone in, I've been running my own thing for about 6 years now, 5 or 6 years, and I think because I feel like I have that flexibility. So, at the school, at the end of the day, I'll go and get my son. If there's a day when I can't do something, or if it's school holidays, I will flex my hours around that. And because the business is in quite big growth mode at the moment, it does mean working really long hours. But I suppose, to your point, that is my choice. I am choosing to log back on at night and do work then. I'm choosing to work funny hours and do weekends and things. I don't have someone breathing down my neck telling me I need to be there at this time.
But then I guess as an entrepreneur yourself, and when it's mission led, it's like the mission never ends. And when it's like a world changing thing as well, then you can feel a lot of pressure. Like, if I don't do this, then women are going to be unhappy for the next decade. And so actually, like, we have to be quite firm with ourselves almost. So I've been in business for nearly 9 years, and like even this year, I felt like I'd really cracked my work-life balance in a way that I hadn't before. And then you just suddenly have like a really busy week and you're like, oh, why have I done this to myself? And it takes time to learn, because when you love what you do, that's a brilliant thing, isn't it? I didn't think when I left my last sort of career job, I didn't think it would be an option for me to do work that I really loved. And so to build a business where it's like, literally, if I don't want to do it, we don't do it anymore. That's the philosophy kind of behind the scenes of my business.
Yeah.
But like, it often isn't like that in the workplace, is it? Like, you can get bogged down in very sort of complicated political things at work, and like there can be things that you have to do because someone else on the team doesn't pull their weight, and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I think it's understanding for each of us, like, what are the ingredients that make up like your ideal working situation? Is that an employed situation? For some people, like they wouldn't want to be self-employed, and actually an employed career job, at quite a high level often is like their ideal thing that they would love to do. But I think it's so powerful when women start to get that vision of like, I can actually create anything that I want. I don't just have to sort of show up and occupy myself until it's time to rush off to the next thing.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think that's when, as you say, I mean, I'm really fortunate that, and it's not an overnight thing. And that's the other thing. When you look at people who are, you're talking about the amount of time you've been in business, and I've said, about 6 years now, I think. And I still feel like we're just on the cusp now of finally getting to a point where it feels right, it's growing, it's all doing the right things. So it does take incredible amounts of hard work and heartache as well, definitely highs and lows.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? And I think we can also get quite addicted to the fact that it's a roller coaster. And like, one of the things that I've had to talk to myself quite sternly about is just like, stop enjoying the drama. Let's not make it into a drama. Let it be easy. I'm curious, Jane, do you have like any like sort of little stories from like things that you've heard inside careering into motherhood, of like the difference that you've been able to make for people through your organization, and the kind of things that I'm putting you right on the spot here, but the kind of things that women have been able to achieve and do as a result of their contact with careering into motherhood?
Well, we have always, since I started, even though I was running a recruitment business at the time, I've always encouraged anyone who is recruiting, who's a member of the group, or employers. If I see something on LinkedIn, I'll say, hey, share this on our group. So we've always encouraged anyone who's recruiting to recruit from our group. There is no charge for hiring from within the community. I want employers in there seeing the wealth of talent that we have there within the group and recruiting. So it's always lovely when I get an email from someone saying, thanks so much, I found a role through this group. And then often what happens is that person will go on, join that company, and then either if they're moving on or if they're hiring, they will come back to the group and hire from within. So that's always really nice to think that this idea of something or other that I had way back 5 years ago is now helping people to actually get jobs that they love. And then obviously I have the podcast as well, and sometimes I'll be really honest, you wake up in the morning and think, oh, I don't really feel like it's today. I don't really feel like being kind of recorded or broadcasting. And yet it's always on those days when I'll get an email come through going, thank you so much. The podcast has really helped me. And that's usually, I'm not blowing my own trumpet. I have amazing guests. And Jessica, you've been on the podcast as well.
I have,
yes. I think it's coming out this week, actually. So I'm really fortunate to be able to interview some amazing women, and that's really nice to know when you've heard from someone who's like, oh, I was just in a really sticky situation, and the podcast has really helped them. So that's all great. And then of course now with the coaching arm as well, being able to connect women with really great coaches, and I get a lot of really, really tricky situations emailed to me in terms of how these women are feeling, the help they need. And, it's actually I'm quite emotional just talking about it. I'm thinking of a couple that I had last week. It is not easy. And for someone to turn to, I guess, our community and ask for some help, I think, just hugely full of admiration for those people asking for the help. But also it's just so lovely to be able to say, yes, we've got 70 plus women. I can put you in touch with can connect you with a short list. And I honestly believe, I keep saying this, but I think coaching is life-changing.
Yeah. I have 3, possibly 4 coaches and 2 therapists right now. So I'm fully sold on that.
Self-development. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, you have to be, because there are so many hurdles that you hit along the road. And I look back to what I was like. I had a nervous breakdown when I was 27, and I crashed out of my corporate career at that point. And then after that, I did actually have a flexible working job. I'm working for a startup occupational psychology consultancy firm. But the person that I was at that point, I can literally look back. I just turned 40 a couple of weeks ago. I am not the same person I was when I was 30. And part of that is because I have become a coach, and therefore you have to do the work, because if you don't do it, it shows up for your clients and you're like, oh, I can't help you because I'm struggling with this too. But at the same time, the time and the money that I've invested in personal development, in coaching, in support, because it's hard to do what we do. And I think for anyone coming into the Careering into Motherhood group, they're not coming for no reason. They're coming because there's some need there. Yes. And actually to be in a situation where you're like, I'm not being treated well, or I'm not getting a fair deal, or I'm not being paid what I should be. And then to sort of have to advocate for yourself and fight those battles and have those difficult conversations. Sometimes it can be it can just be agonizing, can't it? Having to fight your corner when you're really down and when you're really struggling. So I think I love that you've incorporated the coaching side into things, because it is such a powerful way of women being able to take control of their own lives and just be like, this is what I want. Often, it can be like, oh, I don't know what I want. I can't have anything. All of the things I want, they're not available to me. That is such a powerless statement. And actually, for almost everyone, it's not actually true. There's always something where we can start to be like, this is the shape that I want this to be. This is how I want my life to actually be, instead of what I'm seeing. But I do think, from my experience as a coach, it can take months, if not years, sometimes, for women to reach that point where they even will allow themselves to express a need, because so much of what they've experienced, and this was I don't know about you, Jane, this was a shock to me when I became a mother. I was like, this is so hard. And I think when you've kind of been at the coalface and 24/7 looking after a baby, it's hard, isn't it? I've been reading this column in The Guardian, one of their column writers, she's got a small baby at the moment, and I said to my husband, just FYI, nothing has changed since our kids were babies. It's exactly as hard as we remember it being, because you kind of relive it, don't you? And it's why are they crying? No one knows. But I do think that being able to emerge from the state of motherhood where everything like comes from your body literally all the time, and it's your energy and no one can really take your place in that. I mean, it's a wonderful privilege, but it's also a huge weight to carry. From that state of motherhood where you're actually like, I'm a person and I'm allowed to want stuff, I'm allowed to aspire to things. I still feel quite selfish when I do something that I want to do. And I got told off by one of my children this week because I got given a big box of chocolates and I ate one. And he's like, well, where's mine? And I was like, this isn't yours. This belongs to mummy. But, you know, even in the small things, you have to sort of create those boundaries. And it can feel very difficult. Like, you know, kids aren't programmed to see us as separate beings or entities from them, are they? So actually, it is quite important that we can lovingly sometimes draw that boundary and be like, some of these things are just for mummy and not everything is entirely for you. And it's good for your ego development to know that.
Yes, yeah, it's true. I was just talking with somebody else this morning. She's running a retreat, and it just sounds amazing. And yet this idea that we don't easily carve out time for ourselves. Okay, that's 3 days and it sounds absolutely incredible, but even just sort of 20 minutes to go and do something for ourselves, there's huge ramifications around how we feel about, there's, you know, mum guilt and all of that kind of stuff, and we've just got to get rid of that. We're all just doing the absolute best we can. There's nothing to feel guilty about that.
Yeah, and I do think it's part of like, because motherhood it can be so exhausting that's when you're least able to like take a sort of wise and mature perspective on these things. And you know, just being part of a community is important because you need other people to be like, can I just let you know you're doing such an amazing job, like this is how it feels to you, but this is how it looks to me. And sort of really reflecting, because I think when you're in it and when you're struggling and you feel the guilt over everything, and am I even allowed to go and get my hair cut because everyone just cries when I'm not in the house, you know, I think like you need that perspective of like, this is actually going well. Like it doesn't always feel as well as it's going.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's really hard when you're in it and you're just running from one thing to another. It's really hard. I mean, I'm not a coach, so I don't want to veer into talking about sort of coaching type things.
Thing is, you say that, but I bet you have so many conversations with different women, Jane, that you're more than qualified to talk about any of these things.
Yes, I mean, I do. I mean, I feel really privileged that I get to talk to so many of you, and you're all doing amazing, like slightly different things, but all doing great things, and I get so much from it. But I'm always very conscious that I'm not the professional coach here. I'm the marketing comms person.
Definitely. And I guess we've got a little bit of time. One thing that we haven't talked about, which I would love to ask your opinion on, is the whole dynamic of kind of how we incorporate dads into this whole equation. Because I think that one thing that I'm often conscious of is that when mothers feel disenfranchised and disempowered, often it's not just what's going on at work, it's also the dynamic that's playing out for them at home. Like we've seen the statistics on like what lockdowns were like for women, and I certainly, I have a fairly egalitarian relationship with my husband, but like I felt like guilty for wanting to work during lockdown because my real job was looking after the children, because nationally it suddenly felt like women's work is now optional because they are doing the childcare indefinitely. What's your stance on that whole discussion? Because it's a difficult one, isn't it? But like I think it is a very important part of the equation.
Definitely. And I'm only smiling because it's a really pertinent question for us right now. So we've got our big first ever face-to-face event coming up in March, and been talking to a number of companies about getting involved, and almost invariably all of the sponsors raised the very valid question: why are you just talking to women? Why are you just talking to mothers? And my thing, it comes back to this empowerment thing. We have a huge range of women who represent all kinds of diversity within our community. And I would never pretend to be able to have the kind of conversations that need to happen among 20,000 women, whether that's at home or whether that's in the workplace. We could never be having those micro conversations for that number of people. But what we are about is empowering women to be able to go and have the conversations they need to have with whomever they need to have. So one of the things was, well, surely one of the things I get all the time is surely men need to be involved in the debate, in the conversation, and to be part of the solution. Of course they do. And whether that, no matter who you are as a man, whether you're a father, whether you're a manager, whether you're whatever your situation is, you have a role to play in supporting our push for women to have the same opportunities in the workplace as the majority of men. Now, that's not all men by any accounts. There are lots of men in same-sex relationships, same-sex partnerships. There are lots of men who find themselves single dads, but we are talking about the majority of men. And as I say, so to that end, we are not even able to have the level of conversations that need to happen in every single community, every single family. But what we can do is have the conversations so that all women feel empowered to be able to create the conversations and the circumstances and the environments to be able to bring in the relevant kind of stakeholders that need to be involved in order to make my life easier, or in order to make your life easier. I'm never going to say to you, hey, Jessica, here's a blueprint to go and have a conversation with your husband or with whoever you need to in order to make everything rosy for you. What we can do is say, here are some conversations, here are some dialogues, here's some tools so that you can empower yourself to go and have those conversations.
Yeah, I love that, because it's so individual as well. Like again, it links to like women knowing what they actually need and want, being able to articulate that, and then being able to put in place the conversations, whether it's at work or at home, in order to bring that into being. I do think it's really important. And I don't mind sharing, like I said, I have quite an egalitarian marriage, but for us, it was definitely a very difficult time when my business overtook my husband's career in terms of revenue and income, but also time and priority, because the early years of my business, I was the one who was always the point of contact. Oh, could you just come and pick them up from nursery? Oh, they've just been sick at school. And you're kind of I'm the mum, it's kind of expected that I do this. But for us, that point at which, and I did have to say to my husband at one point, I just want to say, you think that your work is more important than mine? And he was like, no, I don't. And I was like, you do. And we had to have this whole discussion about it. It was really uncomfortable. It would be much easier to just say nothing and to just go along with it. I think it was so worth having that conversation, because the awareness that it gave both of us into what we needed to do differently, as a team, in order to both flourish and both kind of carry the load of what it means to sort of be working parents together. I don't think, being married to a man, he doesn't have the assumption that he has any parental responsibilities. So quite often he has to kind of self-advocate and be like, I do have children. I'm expected to pick them up at this time. And he's like, oh, that feels really uncomfortable to do that. And I'm like, well, welcome to what it's like for women. It's terrible to be married to a feminist and a coach. But at the same time, I think you're right. It's not just mothers. Of course, it's also fathers, and there are different challenges on both sides. But I think when we can sort of work together, and not every partner is open to that discussion. I think we have to be very upfront about that. But when we can start to shift that perspective and to just be like, what if this wasn't an issue for women? What if this is an issue for parents and for families, and we can actually all approach it together on common ground? I think that is a very different discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we always talk about this, that not every woman wants to go out and be, a career woman, or have, or wants, some people. Everyone at the moment has a very unique, has a unique situation and a unique set of requirements. And that's so we are not about pushing any one solution. There is no one solution. I think if the pandemic again taught us anything, it was exactly that, when we were suddenly all thrown into working under one roof or just living under one roof all the time. You know, it was, and suddenly we were seeing people's children or dogs or whatever it was on Zoom. It was so obvious that it was so evident that we all live such different lives. So it's about creating something that works for you and your family.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Jane, we've spoken, you know, often about careering into motherhood during our conversation today. Where can people come and find out more about what it means to come into your Facebook group? Like, how do people do that?
So obviously, yes, you can join the Facebook group. It's just Careering into Motherhood. You'll find the page, and then got 3 questions that we ask you, and we can add you to the community. And as saying, you know, you'll find a welcoming, warm, supportive community of 10,000 other working mums. And then also our website, obviously, which is careeringintomotherhood.com, where you'll find heaps of free tools and resources. I'm really acutely aware as you know, the current economic challenges and things, not everyone can afford to self-fund some coaching. So if your employer isn't offering that and you feel like you need some support but you can't quite afford it, we have loads and loads of free, really great content, all provided by our coaches. So head over there and have a look at us. And we've got a new website launching the end of December, let's say, for now. So
oh, exciting.
It should be really exciting.
Yeah, and so people can come in and like they can find a coach and pay to work with them, but to actually come in, it's free. That's
yes,
right, isn't
that's
it?
right. Yep, you can access all the tools, all the information. If you sign up to our newsletter, then you'll receive it on a monthly basis straight into your inbox and so on. But
yeah, and the other thing is that they can also, you can come into the Facebook group and you can make yourself anonymous when you ask a question, so you don't need to feel like you're sort of bearing your soul and everyone's like, oh, she works at that company.
Yeah, that's very true, very true.
Oh, amazing. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking about these things with you, Jane. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being my guest today. Thank you for just the amazing work that you're doing. It's so needed in the world. I wish that it wasn't, but I'm so glad that people like you are working hard and like creating this complete vision. It is life-changing for women. Like the fact that there's so many thousand women under your banner, and you know they need this kind of help. So like I'm so thankful that you're there. I know that you work incredibly hard. That is an exhausting thing to set up the size of what you've done, Jane, but like I'm really thankful that you are doing that and have done that.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching today. I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation. Do go over and find out more about careering into motherhood if you would like to, and I will see you again for the next episode of 7 Figure Consultant Conversations.